This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. If you're watching us before your evening's entertainment, then thank you. If we are your evening's entertainment, then also thank you. Here's what we got for y'all. There are some big changes announced for the future of Facebook. We're digging into Mark Zuckerberg's keynote speech from the social media site's annual conference. Then we have a pretty good idea of how the vaccine rollout has gone here in the US, but how does that compare to other places around the world? We take a look, but first, Halloween is this weekend, y'all, and there are a lot of classics to dress up as this year, but nothing can top the most popular Halloween costume in the US, at least according to the internet, and that's the witch. What's so interesting about witches is they're not just Halloween icons. They've become an icon of feminist empowerment too. There's a growing community around witchcraft today, from casual interest in the culture and wellness practices to self-identified practicing witches casting spells. So how do we get from witch hunts to where we are now?
In the Middle Ages, people were quite often thought to have magical expertise, and it was thought to be okay that they had that. So in most villages, there would be at least a couple of people who thought that they could undertake magical healing. But from the Tudor period onwards, there's an increasing concern that people who have some kind of medical or magical knowledge might well be in league with the devil. And of course, women didn't have medical training in the way that men did in the period. So a woman who said she could heal your child might be thought to be suspicious. Where did she get that knowledge from?
In the 15 and 1600s, we see waves of brutal witch hunts. Thousands of people in Europe were tried and killed over suspected witchcraft, on a much bigger scale than the infamous Salem witch trials in America, which killed about 20 people. Legally speaking, unmarried and older women were often easier targets to blame since they weren't protected by a husband or a father. That might be why our image of witches gets associated with older women living in isolation. But eventually, witches became less of a real-world threat and more of a folklore figure.
There's a real stereotype of the witch, isn't there? So you get this elderly crone who maybe has even a green face, who stands out from other human beings, maybe wears a pointy hat, travels around on a broom, has a black cat with her. All of these things start to come in really in the Victorian period, and you even start to see them appearing on things like greetings cards.
By the time we get to the 20th century, we start to see actually positive portrayals of witches. One of the biggest turning points was The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, published in 1900 and later adapted into the iconic film in 1939. It featured evil archetypal witches.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too.
But it also featured good, even motherly witches.
I've never heard of a beautiful witch before. Only bad witches are ugly.
Well, progress or not, it was still the 1930s. Anyway, it's worth noting the book had an interesting feminist legacy itself. The author, Frank Baum, was a women's rights advocate and son-in-law of one of the co-founders of the National Women's Suffrage Association. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz even got banned in some libraries for having women in strong leadership roles. And as late as 1986, it came under fire by some for its depiction of benevolent witches. Yeah, that's 1986, not 1686. But by then, witches had already reached a cultural high point in popular culture. TV shows like Bewitched, Charmed, and Sabrina the Teenage Witch showed us witches as protagonists. And this correlated with the rise of second and third wave feminism, which isn't a coincidence. Stories of women having power and agency were being celebrated more, instead of being met with suspicion or seen as a threat. Common witch tropes like the old aging woman pitted against the young ingenue grew outdated or were sometimes even subverted. It's no wonder that today, modern witchcraft and Wicca culture fosters and embraces an association with feminist empowerment. US-based communities have even adopted witchcraft as a symbol of political resistance. Interest in witches has soared since the 2016 presidential election, when groups of over 10,000 neo-pagans united to cast spells to limit President Trump's power.
Witchcraft and its portrayal in popular culture is so interesting because it really tracks the progress of feminism. It makes us think about what we think about women in the society around us, the the witch is so often a figure for the feminist or for the ordinary woman in the street. So she sits in that ground between real history, which of course lots of people are interested in, and fantasy and the sort of popular culture empowerment of witch figures. And I think that gives the witch her cultural energy. I think it's an ongoing fascination. The witch is going to be with us for a very, very long time.
We've talked a lot about witches in history and pop culture, and now we're going to take a look at communities who do practice witchcraft themselves today. There are a lot of factors behind this present-day rise in popularity of witches. Newsy's correspondent Casey Mendoza spoke to the experts and even traveled to a magic shop to learn more about its enduring popularity.
We keep all of our herbs, magical ingredients, weird things in here.
Witchcraft is having a moment right now, and not just because Halloween is right around the corner.
Here are some of our unique animal products that, as far as I know, you won't be able to find anywhere else in the city.
In the Chicago neighborhood of Rogers Park is the Malloway Brothers Magic and Witchcraft Shop. Run by brothers Blake and Wick Malloway, the store carries rare occult books, in-house oils and potions, and shelves of candles for different rituals and spells.
So we've got like the wedding candles, the pyramid candles, which I love. They're great for drawing down energy.
The store opened in 2018 also as a home for things like tarot readings and workshops on how to actually practice witchcraft.
Our October calendar in particular is probably my favorite. We have a broomstick making workshop coming up where we talk about the folklore and the symbolism of the witch's broom.
The Malloways' in-person events book up pretty quickly now, and it shows the growing popularity of witchcraft, especially among young people.
And they'll say, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I want to seriously start pursuing witchcraft. Are there any books or any things you can recommend to help me get started? And these are the questions that I love. Other times you get people that come in and say, I want to bring my lover back. What book can you give me? Calm yourself.
Broadly speaking, there is no one way to practice witchcraft. It's based on centuries of rituals to commune with spirits and nature through practices like candle work, tarot, and astrology. There's this perception of witchcraft as something that only exists in fairy tales and fantasies, but witches have spanned different cultures and communities around the world. The pagan religion Wicca is one example of that. There are several more, and some of the practices of magic and spellcraft are pretty ubiquitous too, like making wishes through birthday candles or carrying around rabbit's feet for good luck.
Everybody in America knows that we carry rabbit's feet for good luck, right? You can buy them at gas stations. Granted, they're not real at the gas stations, but it's like those types of things that are just so ingrained into who we are as people that people do these things without even thinking about it.
Modern magic and witchcraft is building off of that history, and new practitioners are drawn to it for its ritual and spirituality without the structure of mainstream religion, the way it can be interpreted in personal ways, and the sense of control it can offer, especially after the chaos of the past couple years.
I think with magic, as it's been used for, hundreds and hundreds of years, has been, a means of taking back, that control, being able to influence that change that you're not seeing in the world right now.
Online, witch communities have found homes on Tumblr, Twitch, and TikTok, as well as forums on casual game platforms like Neopets.
And I remember talking to people about astrology on Neopets when I was a kid. And, you seek out these spaces online because you're different. And it just kind of leads to, these spaces for things like witchcraft, astrology, all these other things, these fringe belief systems that are now becoming more popularized.
Rena is a witch from New York who live streams on Twitch and TikTok, where the hashtag WitchTalk has more than 20 billion views.
In the TikTok streams, I'll get between 1,000 and 2,000 people just talking about all of this stuff, witchcraft, astrology, tarot.
It's a rapidly growing online community, one that is also sometimes based more on a trendy aesthetic or style rather than the actual practice and belief system. And so that raises this question.
Do either of you ever worry that it becomes kind of like this passing trend for some people?
Yeah, I do. And it's going to be.
Yeah.
As much as I hate to say it, it is going to be a passing fad for a few people.
You know, we're just happy people take a passing interest, I think, in witchcraft. And like, if you don't stick with it, I mean, that's between you and your gods. Like.
For now, the modern resurgence of witchcraft and magic continues to grow, and if its centuries-long history has any indication on its future, it's not going anywhere. Casey Mendoza, Newsy, Chicago.
After the break, we'll take you through everything circulating on the internet, from Capitol Hill to the weird world of dog-inspired cryptocurrency. Stick around. Welcome back, gang. Now that we're all a part of the same coven, we thought we'd zip through social media together and see what's poppin'. Here are some of today's trending topics. Build Back Better is trending after President Biden unveiled details of his $1.75 trillion spending bill, meant to make investments in childcare, healthcare, and fighting climate change.
I know we have a historic economic framework. It's a framework that will create millions of jobs, grow the economy, invest in our nation and our people.
This proposal is like a months-long group project, and we all know how much of a slog that can be. This bill is super slimmed down from the original $3.5 trillion proposal, and it doesn't include things like paid family or medical leave or free community college. But it does still include things like free pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds, a limit on childcare costs, and more than $500 billion for programs to move Americans toward electric vehicles. Biden said his economic framework will have the support of all 50 Democrats in the Senate, including some notable holdouts up to now like Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia. You know those headline-grabbing, unprovoked shark attacks we hear about periodically? Turns out, folks, those attacks are all just a big misunderstanding. New research that I suspect was conducted by sharks suggests many shark bites happen because of mistaken identity. Apparently, when we swim or surf, we look like seals or sea lions from the bottom. Considering my pandemic frame, they might have a point. Some jokes aside, researchers put together a simulation to analyze how juvenile white sharks see their environments. And here's what they found. Pretty similar, right? The focus was on juvenile white sharks because they are the most frequent biters. This research expands what we know about sharks and how they see the world, but it also comes on the heels of a pro-shark campaign from US and Australian shark scientists. As a way of changing the perception of an animal whose numbers are dwindling due to overfishing, scientists have opted for less sensationalist language, like negative shark encounter instead of shark attack. And we should note, shark bites are still extremely rare. There were 33 unprovoked bites in the US last year. 3 of them were fatal. Given the recent shark findings, I'm pretty sure the next wave of shark PR will be a campaign featuring Lenny from Shark Tales.
Okay, I will tell you. I'm a vegetarian.
We know that Shiba Inus are popular online and in real life. I mean, it's not hard to see why, but they also represent the face of wildly popular cryptocurrencies. Just this week, Shiba Inu coin hit an all-time high and rose nearly 175% over 7 days. For a moment, Shiba Inu coin blew past Dogecoin, another Shiba-inspired digital currency. So why is the K9 crypto getting so much attention now? The boost of Shiba Inu coin could be because of advocates online pushing for the cryptocurrency to be added to the Robinhood trading app. There's even a petition that's gained hundreds of thousands of signatures. But the price of Shiba also jumped earlier this month when Tesla CEO and crypto fanboy Elon Musk posted a picture with his Shiba Inu puppy. That led some to speculate he owned Shiba Inu coin, but Musk later clarified that he didn't own any just this week. Shiba Inu coin, known as a meme coin or meme token, was created in August of 2020. That same month, a crypto investor bought $8,000 worth of Shiba Inu coin, which is now worth more than $5 billion. Today was a big day for Facebook. In case you are out of the loop and missed the most recent ITL episode, Facebook is trying to rebrand and shape a whole new so-called Metaverse. During the annual Facebook Connect conference, CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg kicked off the event with a keynote about what the future of the company could look like. Newsy's tech correspondent Jason Bellini tuned into the conference, so you don't have to go back and watch the whole thing yourself. Jason, what are some of the major takeaways?
Christian, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg described today as what he described as a journey that's going to go on for decades. And Facebook wants to be a leader in building the metaverse, building the hardware. We're talking about VR goggles, virtual reality goggles, and augmented reality glasses, but also building the metaverse itself. So what is the metaverse? Mark Zuckerberg himself attempted to describe it and sort of show what he's thinking here. Take a look.
It is time for us to adopt a new company brand to encompass everything that we do. To reflect who we are and what we hope to build, I am proud to announce that starting today, our company is now Meta.
This presentation went on for almost an hour and a half. Mark Zuckerberg showing us what his vision of the metaverse is, and that includes work. I mean, picture being at a conference room where you're wearing these VR goggles and you're next to somebody and you're able to interact with them and talk with them. It's not that Zoom experience that we have now. That's what he's talking about. He's also talking about exercise, that we'll be able to exercise in these artificial environments. In fact, we got to see this, and this is a rarity when we're talking about big corporate CEOs. We got to see him in his workout shorts in this virtual world that he is describing to us. To be sure, Facebook's been under enormous public pressure, especially in the last few weeks, relating to the leaked internal documents being dubbed the Facebook Papers that show that people inside of Facebook, that Facebook itself knew that it was causing harm and that it didn't do very much to remedy that it put profits ahead of everything else. Facebook pushes back against that narrative, saying that it's a false narrative. But Zuckerberg today, he didn't get into that. He didn't even mention the Facebook Papers and all this controversy surrounding his company. I spoke to a leading expert on the metaverse to ask her what she makes of all this.
I think they need to change the narrative and go back to this narrative of Facebook as a company trying to connect people and bring good to the world. But at the same time, we're not going to be naive about this. There are very powerful economic incentives about creating the metaverse.
Zuckerberg says he's spending all this money because he believes that the metaverse is going to unlock new possibilities for making money in this virtual world. Christian?
Much appreciated, Jason, for the updates. The pandemic has done a number on employment for businesses and workers. When we're back, we'll tell you more about staffing shortages in our nation's medical centers.
Newsy Tonight is changing the conversation.
Incredible footage coming in live right now.
Away from opinions and arguments.
Tell our viewers how people there are preparing for the next extreme weather event.
Primetime news focused on facts. Understanding.
This is an investigation you will only see here tonight.
Reporting what matters and why it matters to you.
We're not really as divided as it may seem. Let's break down our latest Newsy poll.
Newsy Tonight, weeknights at 8, 7 Central, only on Newsy.
Over the last year and a half, hospitals have been on the front lines of the pandemic while also dealing with a serious nursing shortage. That was already an issue before the pandemic, in part because of a large number of retiring nurses. But the nurse shortage was exacerbated once COVID hit. Nearly a third of the U.S. hospital workforce has either quit or been laid off during the pandemic, according to global data firm Morning Consult. National correspondent Dan Grossman looks at what's being done to try and retain and recruit people to fill in those gaps.
All right, secure tube to patient gown. Secure tube to nose, attach suction.
It is almost redundant to call nurses lifelines.
Medical history, cranial surgery, make sure that they haven't had any pituitary procedures.
But at colleges and universities nationwide, the current crop of students are quite literally lifelines.
They are motivated to get to the end of their program so that they can contribute and help.
First a nurse and now the dean of a nursing college, Dr. Zoe Joanna Hill knows each of her students now serve a purpose greater than the noble one they are studying to pursue.
The shortage has plagued the industry for as long as I can remember. It makes me very sad because nurses everywhere work so hard and are so dedicated to what they're doing.
Estimates nationwide show over the course of the last 19 months, 18% of our country's healthcare workforce has quit their jobs, while an additional 12% have been laid off, many of them nurses. It has led to a nursing shortage that has exploded from 300,000 pre-pandemic to more than 1.8 million now. A recent survey by ShiftMed shows the problem is one that will likely persist, as 49% of responding nurses said they were also considering leaving their jobs within the next 2 years.
We're at a tipping point. We're at a crux with our healthcare system.
Joshua Ewing is the vice president of Colorado's Hospital Association and says the solution lies in retention and recruitment. Nurses have reported low pay, burnout, and a lack of flexibility as the 3 largest reasons for leaving. So Joshua says addressing those needs first is imperative.
We need to focus on caring for those who are caring for us today. So taking care, providing mental health supports, retention support, to make sure that they're feeling valued and supported financially. And we need to be looking at how we can move folks in bedside positions now into more leadership roles as we see this great resignation of healthcare workers across the country.
Next is recruitment. Because this need is immediate, some colleges, like Bellarmine University in Louisville, have added accelerated nursing degrees to their curriculum, while others are improving their outreach so they can reach more people who might be considering a different profession. In Colorado, Joshua is focusing on legislators, hoping they'll reevaluate policies that can restrict the movement of licensed professionals across state lines, saying the need is too great.
How we approach these next weeks, months, and years will be defining for the future of our healthcare system.
We need the drape, the emesis bag.
This is not a job, it's a calling.
In modern times, our healthcare system has not been tested to this degree.
One that is desperately calling for help.
For me, failure is not an option. We have to start thinking creatively. We have to start thinking differently.
For Newsy, I'm Dan Grossman.
Up next, we're giving you a global look at the vaccine rollout and where the US falls in that.
Sunday nights, Newsy takes you to the edge. Exploring untold stories.
It's literally an existential threat.
Going far beyond the headlines.
Today, social media is the real world.
Hey, grandkids. There needs to be a bridging of the gap.
In real life, a next-generation news magazine. New episodes, Sunday nights at 8:30, 7:30 Central, only on Newsy.
Let's take a step back in time right quick. Remember when the first COVID-19 vaccines were approved? There were lines everywhere. Getting a few essentials at my local drugstore meant I had to squeeze through lines of folks waiting to get their shots. Demand was soaring, and at the height of the rollout, the US was administering more than 3 million vaccines a day. Since then, according to Our World in Data, the US has the lowest vaccination rate out of the world's 7 largest developed countries. 65% of the US population is fully vaccinated. But that relatively low US vaccination rate isn't due to a lack of supplies, more like a lack of willingness. While the US debates a booster shot, people in many parts of the world haven't had the chance to get a first shot. Just 3.1% of people in low-income countries have received at least 1 dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Tonight, we're putting our attention on the global vaccine rollout in other countries because, after all, this is a global pandemic, and it's not really over in one country until it's over in most countries. Today, the country with one of the lowest vaccination rates in the world is Haiti. That's not hard to wrap your mind around considering they just got the first batch of vaccine doses earlier this summer. The US sent 500,000 doses of the Moderna vaccine through the global vaccine program COVAX. The thing is, the country's had its hands full with other issues, like recovering from a massive earthquake that killed more than 2,000 people. That pushed its already fragile healthcare system to the brink. Right now, less than 1% of the population is vaccinated, and progress is slow. Unlike other countries, it hasn't seen as bad a wave of COVID-19, but cases started to double at the beginning of this year. Still, many Haitians don't see COVID as a big threat, and that's contributing to vaccine hesitancy. Only 22% of adults in Haiti were open to getting the COVID vaccines, according to a survey conducted by UNICEF and the University of Haiti back in June. Just getting the vaccines where they need to go has been a challenge with a lack of electricity in many clinics and an increase in gang violence on the roads to get there. At this rate, it could take the country years to get everyone there vaccinated against COVID-19. Another side of this issue, you have countries with a population that largely wants the vaccine, but just can't get their hands on enough supply. That includes India. It has the world's largest population and has fully vaccinated just about 30% of it. While that doesn't sound like a lot, that translates to 291 million shots administered. Still, experts predict herd immunity would have to include anywhere from 60 to 80% of the population. So there's a lot of work to still be done. The push really ramped up in India after a second wave of COVID hit the country this summer. India has since made it out of that surge, but experts say a third wave is extremely likely since much of the country reopened despite concerns over variants. Officials in India set a goal of getting the rest of the population fully vaccinated by the end of the year. But to do that, they need to administer more than 10 million doses a day. In August, the daily average was around 6 million. India is currently using 3 vaccines: AstraZeneca, Covaxin, which was created by an Indian firm, and the Russian-made Sputnik V. The country isn't even looking into booster shots yet. They're still focused on getting more of the general population that first dose of a vaccine. Many of the countries with the lowest vaccine rates are in Africa. According to Our World in Data, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Tanzania, and the Democratic Republic of Congo all have less than 1% of their population fully vaccinated. Our correspondent Chris Akamringa has more from the Democratic Republic of Congo on the mounting challenges these countries are facing.
The COVID-19 pandemic has spread to every one of the 26 provinces in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's the second largest country in Africa, with an estimated population of 90 million people. But figures from the country's COVID-19 National Task Force show only 85,000 people have been vaccinated so far. Congolese distrust in vaccines intensified after European countries suspended the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine over blood clot fears in March.
We heard that those vaccines have negative side effects. Our president even refused to take the shot because he doesn't trust it. That's one of the reasons I'm against getting vaccinated. The other reason is that our COVID task force hasn't provided us with enough information about the benefits of getting that shot.
The DRC ended up giving back 1.3 million doses out of the 1.7 million it received from the UN-backed COVAX program in March.
One vial of the AstraZeneca vaccine contains 8 doses. Once we open it, we have to quickly administer it to 8 people, but we sometimes receive only 1 or 2 people willing to take the jab the whole day. We've ended up throwing away many doses because an open vial gets spoiled if it stays long in room temperature.
The country recently received a new batch of Moderna vaccines from the United States through the COVAX program. The UN says the arrival of the Moderna vaccine is a big step in the DRC's fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. But this country has a long way to go to convince people to roll up their sleeves and get a shot.
I'm not willing to get that new COVID-19 vaccine because I'm not sick, and I've not yet seen anyone who got that disease in our country. I only keep hearing reports about people who have died abroad.
Those foreign scientists designed the vaccines for people living in their climate. Our tropical weather has kept us immune from that disease. That's why I won't take that vaccine. I consider it a deadly poison.
We want to see our leaders get vaccinated first, and then we will consider taking the jab. We're afraid of the negative side effects of those vaccines.
Public health officials are trying to come up with a strategy to counter misleading information on social media.
Now fake news are spreading more than the right information, and we have to make to follow them, to give the right answer sometimes. But the biggest problem is on something spread from social media coming from abroad, United States, America. Those are videos running like this. Once it's spread in the population here in Congo is by mouth or by talking.
The epicenter of the pandemic in the DRC is in the capital, Kinshasa, but cases of the disease have also been recorded in the east of the country, where there's an ongoing conflict. That makes it more difficult to contain the pandemic. The US government and international aid agencies are supporting the DRC with logistics to deliver COVID-19 medicine and vaccine to people there and in other remote areas.
But vaccine hesitancy is still widespread despite a rising number of cases. And as people in more wealthy nations make plans to get booster shots, the Congolese government now faces a huge task, making available the first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine to its people and convincing them to get the shots. Chris Chamringa for Newsy, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
COVID has been one of the most important stories of the last 2 years, but another defining story has been the questions around the right to vote here in the US. After the break, we'll have more on how voting advocates are worried that that right is currently under threat. Welcome back, gang. There are important state and local elections in places all over the country next week. Voters in 2 states, Virginia and New Jersey, are headed to the polls to select their next governor. But before you go, you might want to check if your state has changed its voting laws. We've seen some states make it easier to vote, but in many states where voting was already difficult, new laws are making it even harder. Georgia was a key state in last year's election. President Biden won it over former President Trump, but the former president has baselessly alleged fraud there. The state's Republican legislature responded by enacting new, stricter voting laws. As national correspondent Jesse Cohen found in her reporting there, voting advocates are worried about the effects those laws may have.
Unfortunately, the states that are making it harder to vote tend to be states in which it is already very hard to vote. And the states that are making it easier to vote are states in which voting is already fairly accessible.
These 25 states passed 62 laws with provisions to expand voting access. However, Eliza says this does not balance the scales. These 19 states passed 33 laws this year that make it harder to vote. Those voters are likely to notice a difference.
So we're seeing this very small death by 1,000 paper cuts way of keeping people from being able to have their vote counted. And even worse, they may not realize it didn't count.
Throughout the 2021 state legislative sessions, there have been more than 425 bills with provisions that restrict voting access introduced. And 4 states, Iowa, Georgia, Kansas, and Texas, have imposed new or more stringent criminal penalties on election officials or other individuals.
The worst part of all these things that are administrative, they're on the processing end, they're on the application side. We're not going to realize that these things have happened until it's too late.
Stephanie Ali, the policy director for the New Georgia Project, is dealing with the fallout firsthand. She says Georgia lawmakers have made mail voting and early voting more difficult, and a new voter ID requirement could keep 250,000 people away from the polls because they don't have a Georgia ID card. Other changes are more subtle.
Not being able to give out water, not being able to give out food is so noticeable and such a big thing that's going to grab attention. But there's actually 5 new criminalizations for voting in SB 202, many of which happen in the privacy of someone's home.
Georgia leaders say the rules actually expand access. The new laws expand weekend voting in some regions and require state officials to keep voting lines under an hour. But Stephanie believes these laws do far more harm than good.
It's going to really just nickel and dime the way that they are able to vote. Instead of seeing, just a huge sweeping change when they first go to the ballot box like they might expect, it's actually going to be little things that stop them up every single time.
And that kind of voter suppression is best dealt with at the federal level And that's why Congress has to act.
Voting advocates are pushing 2 bills in Congress. The first is the Freedom to Vote Act. It's a comprehensive package of voting, redistricting, and campaign finance reforms. It also includes national standards for voting that would ensure access to the ballot across state lines.
Provisions that have been very successful when enacted in states across the country, red and blue. So these are policies that have been tried and true.
The second is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. It would prevent changes to voting rules that discriminate on the basis of race from being implemented. It would also restore voters' robust ability to challenge discriminatory laws.
Those 2 bills are essential to fighting back against this wave of state voter suppression.
In Georgia, I'm Jessie Cohen reporting.
Many thanks to Jesse for that reporting. It has been almost exactly 2 months since the U.S. withdrew the last troops from Afghanistan as the country fell to the Taliban. Ahead of the withdrawal, U.S. officials, NGOs, and citizens raced to make sure that as many Afghans as possible were evacuated, with a particular focus on interpreters and translators who helped the U.S. mission. National correspondent Chris Conti has the story of how one Marine veteran spent months trying to get an Afghan interpreter and his family out of the country.
When Travis Irvin left Afghanistan in 2010, he thought his mission was complete.
I took these in a hospital in Afghanistan.
But looking back at the war and the eventual collapse of the country,
Marines,
Travis quickly realized his mission had only begun.
We were there for 20 years. Did anybody forget that? You know, we're friends with these people. These are our family.
During his deployment with the Marines, Travis worked to clear Taliban strongholds. On every mission, there was an Afghan interpreter by his side. Circumstances are still too dangerous to show his face, but that interpreter might as well have been a Marine himself.
I served with this interpreter overseas in 2010. This guy was in gunfights with me, IEDs with me, IED strikes. I've seen this guy participate in them. I've seen him pick up my dead Marines. Let that sink in. You know? I've seen this interpreter pick up my dead guys and run them to helicopters. And then we're just going to leave this guy and leave his family, you know? It's up to the American people to do this, to help these people.
It's been tough. For 2 months, Travis and his girlfriend deployed all their back-channel resources in efforts to rescue the interpreter and his family.
The process to get them through these airports, to get them through the airport, I mean, I stayed up for 2 weeks. You know, maybe slept 30 minutes a day.
You can imagine then what a moment of this magnitude means for a 32-year-old retired Marine. Those are Travis's interpreter's kids. That is his wife and her 2 brothers. They are all safely in Tennessee. 2 months after their country fell back into the hands of the Taliban, everyone is now living in Travis's house, and he couldn't be happier.
My girlfriend and I, we wake up and we hear the kids running around, talking, you know, speaking Dari, speaking Pashto, and running around. It was like, this is the greatest day of my life, being woken up by these kids.
Travis's basement has been converted into a bedroom and prayer room.
Without his help, that's impossible. We see everything in Kabul. A lot of people died. A lot of people.
These brothers have been through a lot.
And now we feel safe here.
This family, who's never had electricity before, is now starting a new life.
You got to understand, these guys come from real oppression. Very real oppression.
Community donations for everything from food to clothes to toys for the kids have been pouring in.
We are human. Now we feel alive.
But the mission is far from over. Before Kabul fell, Travis's interpreter was split up from his family. They have all made it out, but he remains stuck overseas waiting to get to the U.S. And so this retired Marine's work continues.
I will always help the Afghan people. Always. These people need our help. It's not up to the government. You know, I think everybody thinks that the U.S. government's going to come in and snap their fingers and just make stuff. It's not going to happen. Snap out of it. Help these people.
He's determined. Travis, though, does not lose sight of the major victory that's already been accomplished.
It's a big party.
The mere fact that this family is here.
V.
W.
X.
Y. Z.
Ooh.
That a 7-year-old girl from Afghanistan is starting school in America is a victory within itself.
Research Afghanistan and women going to school and think about this little 7-year-old here showing up in Tennessee and walking into a classroom. It's like, what? Like, we're so lucky. This family is so lucky. It's hard to put into words, it truly is.
And I'm safe. My family's safe. I'm so happy.
This one, it's like, looks just like these kids outside riding bikes, you know? And to have them in my house now, you know? In Tennessee, come on.
Travis Irvin's latest mission may still not be complete, but this is the kind of picture he will savor for now. In Anderson County, Tennessee, I'm Chris Condon.
Thanks to Chris for that reporting. We'll be closing the loop with our top stories here in just a moment, but first, share your thoughts with us on social media using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. We'll check Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, but no guarantee we'll find you on MySpace. I lost my password on that platform years ago after a kerfuffle about my top 8. Just dropped in? Don't worry, we're still here, and we've got a recap of our top stories for you right now. Halloween is this weekend, y'all, and there are a lot of classics to dress up as this year, but nothing can top the most popular Halloween costume in the US, at least according to the internet, and that's the witch. What's so interesting about witches is they're not just Halloween icons. They've become an icon of feminist empowerment, too. In the 15 and 1600s, we see waves of brutal witch hunts. Thousands of people in Europe were tried and killed over suspected witchcraft, on a much bigger scale than the infamous Salem witch trials in America. By the time we get to the 20th century, we start to see actually positive portrayals of witches.
Witchcraft and its portrayal in popular culture is so interesting because it really tracks the progress of feminism. So she sits in that ground between real history, which of course lots of people are interested in, and fantasy and the sort of popular culture empowerment of witch figures. I think it's an ongoing fascination. The witch is going to be with us for a very, very long time.
And we also told you a bit about the challenges some countries face in rolling out vaccines. We're putting our attention on the global vaccine rollout in other countries because, after all, this is a global pandemic and it's not really over in one country until it's over in most countries. Today, the country with one of the lowest vaccination rates in the world is Haiti. Right now, less than 1% of the population is vaccinated, and progress is slow. Unlike other countries, it hasn't seen as bad a wave of COVID-19, but cases started to double at the beginning of this year. Still, many Haitians don't see COVID as a big threat, and that's contributing to vaccine hesitancy. Only 22% of adults in Haiti were open to getting the COVID vaccines, according to a survey conducted by UNICEF and the University of Haiti back in June. On another side of this issue, you have countries with a population that largely wants the vaccine, but just can't get their hands on enough supply. That includes India. It has one of the world's largest populations and has fully vaccinated just about 30% of it. While that doesn't sound like a lot, that translates to 291 million shots administered. The country isn't even looking into booster shots yet. They're still focused on getting more of the general population that first dose of a vaccine. Bad news, folks. That's it for this edition of In the Loop. The good news, though, is that you can find us right here on Newsy, weeknights at 9 p.m. Eastern for more new episodes. Until then, see you next time.